What is up, YouTube? JankyYGO here. My name is Michael, and I'm here with a new video discussing an archetype that I love, but came out at kind of an inopportune time. Or got the final supports at an inopportune time. So, we're here to talk about Heraldic Beasts. So, for a quick summary of the deck, it got its first wave of support all the way back in the Zexal era and Abyss Rising. They were in like 3 sets, spread out through 3 sets, and overall never did anything. However, I think that the issue is that they got their 2 key cards, like the 2 biggest cards that help the archetype, a little late to have them function anyway. So before, there was a couple cards, and they were not a good fleshed out archetype. So in the TCG anyway, there were these 4, and that was it. So there was a Searcher that had to be sent to the graveyard some way, shape, or form. There was this, which gave recovery, this which refueled your Xyz materials with the heraldic monsters in the graveyard, and this that summoned back a psychic Xyz. It wasn't until later that we got the 2 cards that make the deck even somewhat playable nowadays for the TCG, which is in World Superstars, which was Heraldic Beasts, Amphispinae, and their field spell. Now, their field spell isn't good nowadays. However, in the OCG, when it first came out, the spell and trap card targeting was very relevant. Compulse was a card that saw a lot of play back then. So was cards like Dimensional Fissure or Prison. Not Fissure. Dimensional Prison was also a card that saw play. It didn't see a ton of it, and yeah. Anyway, we're gonna talk about what this archetype can do, what the cool thing is about them, and their strengths and their weaknesses. So, to top it off, let's go with the synergy of the deck. So the whole deck relies on being in the graveyard, and all that. They were also a card they were also a deck that back in the day could make use of Lightning Chidori, since they had wind monsters, and they could summon it pretty easily because they don't really restrict what Xyz type of monsters you could make. So that was something that they could do, is they could make Lightning Chidori if you got out Eagle and Aberconway out, before this card came out. I played with this deck using the OCG support. It was when it was OCG only anyway. We have all the cards over here in the TCG now, but when it was OCG only, back around hat format, this deck actually, I think, could have been, maybe not it might not be tier 1, but the thing about the hat format is there was a lot of decks, because it was a slow enough format, and Yu-Gi-Oh's slow formats now aren't like slow formats back then, but a slow format then is like, back then, taking a turn off was okay. Like, there were decks that could OTK you, and it was gonna happen, and if it happened to happen, and that was about it. But for the most part, you could take a turn off, make like a Xyz monster that's alright, and go from there. Keep in mind, this was before links, this was before pendulums, and the dominant extra deck was Xyz, and specifically rank 4. This was around the time when number 101, Silent Honor Arc, and Evil Sworn Exciton Knight came out, that this deck's power level skyrocketed. A card that was available was Lavalval Chain, which helped set up a lot more plays. So the deck had a lot more plays. So what are the strengths and weaknesses of the deck now that I've explained why I think this deck, if it got specifically Emphas Bene and number 18 actually, if it got these two cards in particular earlier, why I think it could have been at least a good tier 2 deck. Well, this archetype was one of the only archetypes I think I know that uses and abuses Xyz monsters to like insane level of potential. Like, the ceiling of this deck is insane, but the floor is like it, like what it can do. And there's videos of this people using the Heraldic Beasts to do insane combos out there. Much better players than I am. I don't have any clips for you, but I have seen them, and they're nuts. I mean, they're a little bricky and inconsistent, as you would imagine, but they're insane. And where most of the deck's power comes from is these two cards right here. So, they have their own Monster Reborn, which a lot of decks do, but if you notice, it's not a once per turn. You can activate as many Heraldry Reborn as you want, and that's where a lot of the strength comes from, or some of the strength comes from. However, they don't just have a Monster Reborn. No. They have what's basically a Miracle Fusion for Xyz. And the only downside and restriction of it is that you have to summon 2 Heraldic Beast monsters from your graveyard, and you can only use those, and you use those ones specifically to Xyz summon, which is Advanced Heraldry Art. So look, target 2 Heraldic Beast monsters in your graveyard, special summon both those targets immediately after this card resolves. Xyz summon 1 Xyz monster using those 2 monsters only. So yeah, between these 2 cards, you could summon like insane board states, and it was like there was a lot of things that was ridiculous. Like I said, keep in mind the power level of Yu-Gi-Oh when these cards were released was a lot like lower, but with cards like this in nowadays stance, and with more Xyz monsters that slowly get printed, there's gonna be more and more ways to slowly like this card gets like better over time, arguably, even if the rest of the monsters don't. So that's kind of where this deck is. We're gonna quickly go over. I'm not gonna read out all their effects in particular, but what I'm gonna do is summarize each card effect for all of you, so that you can get a better picture of what the deck is trying to do. It searches if it's into the graveyard. Generic searcher, kind of. This one recovers if you have another copy of it in the grave. You have to have 2 copies of Aberconway specifically. You banish one, add one to your hand, or add not an Aberconway, but you add any Heraldic Beast monster to your hand. It can be an Aberconway though. This special summons by discarding a Heraldic Beast, and then once per turn you can discard to gain attack, but that part's not really relevant. The relevant part is discarding the Heraldic Beast to summon this. That's the main part, because all your other Heraldic Beasts want to be in the graveyard, and that's where the deck kind of fell flat in the TCG, is they had no like starter cards or enabler cards to really get them in the graveyard, because we didn't have card destruction just got banned and all that, so there was a really clunkiness in the deck. And at the time we had like to use Goblin, you'd have to use like Goblin de Berg, Summoner Monk, or Photon Thrasher to really get the deck going without this card. But the whole getting your monsters in the graveyard is huge. This card is probably the coolest in the entire archetype for what it does. It basically reloads your Xyz monster that don't have materials. So like one of the plays that you used to do, it's not as relevant now, is you'd make number 101 in like attack or defense mode, well, usually defense mode, and then eat their monster, and then set like set a couple traps, and you defend your 101 that way, and then you would reload it and eat another one of their monsters next turn. It's a really good to play. What this card can do now is a lot of decks, kind of stumble when some decks stumble when dealing with Baguska in defense mode, and this can reload your Baguska after the 2 turns after it slowly detaches material, making your opponent's life miserable. There's a lot of other cool things you can do with this, but overall, that's probably the thing that is the coolest, is just that it reloads your material. This summons a Psychic from your graveyard, which is going to be this card 99% of the time, and we'll get to why this card is the freaking best card in the deck. But yeah, we've talked about these 2 cards and how their ceiling is like really insane. This card is pretty bad. Like, summoning 2 Heraldic Beast monsters from your deck in defense position sounds good, but the fact that it restricts you to Psychic and Machine monsters is where its downfall really resides, because most of the level 4 XD, or the rank 4 XD's monsters that are Psychic or Machine are really restrictive. Like, they require other machines. They aren't level 4, or they aren't rank 4, or you need more than that. So, like, this card, I think, is, like, probably the worst. This one is also, like... Okay, so, when it was released in the OCG, its first effect was relevant of your XD's monsters cannot be targeted by spell traps, because this card was kind of your bread and butter, and it made it so it couldn't get compulsed, because that was a meta-relevant card back then. And its second effect was alright, when it was first released in the OCG as well, because you gotta add a spell or trap card, a heraldry spell or trap card from your deck to your hand, except for itself, and with the downside of you can't normal or special monsters during the turn except for Psychics and Heraldic Beasts, but that wasn't as big as a downside, because what ended up happening, or what you could have done, is you use this, discard any of these really, and then you get one of these 2. If you went first and you didn't have this card, what you would do essentially is, like, you'd use this effect, get a reborn, and you since you discarded one of your other graveyard effect ones, you could reborn it and then go into this. That was kind of the bread and butter play, and then maybe set a few trap cards to defend it. This card is something I've never actually played with. When an opponent declares an attack, you can special summon one from your hand, and then you end the battle phase. It's not a very good card. I shouldn't have to tell you why. It wasn't a very good card back when it was released either. Not good at all. And then there's this trap card, counter trap. Your opponent, it stops XDs, and that's what this deck was in the anime. It punished your opponent for using XD's monsters. So we're going to go into the XDs and why some of them are good and some of them aren't so good. So let's talk about number 18, which is the best card out of the Heraldic Beast one specifically. And it has nothing to do with that long ass effect that you see. The only part that matters is if this card is sent to the graveyard, you send 2 Heraldic Beast monsters from your deck to the graveyard. That's why this card is super good. The other text is irrelevant 90% of the time. If there are 2 more monsters with the same name, you target one, destroy all the rest with the same name, and your opponent can't summon monsters with the same name as the chosen for this card effect. It's only really relevant against, like, mirror matches and harpies, or anything that has, like, a harpy-like effect where it's like, oh, all the monsters on the field, I'll treat it as this, you know? Overall, though, you mainly use it for its second effect, because you kind of want it to die. That's why this was relevant. Like I said, Compulse was a thing. You didn't attack with it too much because of Dimensional Prison. You didn't want to get banished. That was about it. We're going to move on. because I've rambled on about this card. This card is like I said, it's like the best card in the deck, and that's about it. This card was really relevant back, or its effect was more relevant, I should say, back in the Zexal era of Yu-Gi-Oh, where Xyzs were literally summoned all the time, and that was what most decks were based on. Like, there was synchros still. There were synchro-based decks, and you could make synchrons and just make Quasar, and Quasar was really good back then. But for the most part, this card's effect was really good because you target an opponent's Xyz monster, and then this card's name becomes it, and you get that monster's effects. It negates that monster, it gets that monster's effects, and the monster's attack becomes 0 that it targeted. That's not as detached either. That's just you target it and that happens. And the change. That's why the number 18 has the effect of, oh, I target one monster and all that. This card and destroy all the rest because this card's name becomes it. So like the idea is, your opponent has a monster that's like, oh, I can't be destroyed by card effects, and Xyz is like, I know we'll use 101 as an example. The idea was you make this and number 18. You activate this, steal 101's effect, maybe eat another one of their special summoned attack position monsters, with the fact that it's replaced it, and then you use number 18's effect to target this and then destroy their 101. That's like the base synergy of the deck and why it has why number 18 has the effect that it does. That's why this card was. But why this card could be good is there was a lot of cards that like you could just really get your opponent with this card. It's not as relevant now, and most of these cards aren't. But that's one of the things that I thought about how cool this deck was. Now, when I first played this deck, it played the rank ups. It played like one rank up in particular, the one that stole a material, because of these two cards that I'm about to talk about. Number 69, nice. If it's special summon, you negate the effects of all face-up Xyz monsters currently on the field, and you target a face-up Xyz monster on the field until the end turn, and its name and effect becomes that. So, you know, when your opponent makes like 3 or 4 big Xyz monsters and everything in a turn, and you find a way to survive, because there was ways basically you played battle traps, so opponents kind of played a lot more cautiously back then, and all that, because the game was a lot slower, so you could really punish them for this. However, the card that really that I loved summoning is C69. Nice. When your opponent declares an attack, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. Sometimes your opponents don't read your cards. That would really mess people up, and it was really good. If this card has number C69 as material, it gains the effect that you can. It basically gains the effect of number 8. So yeah, but it's a 4,000 attacker. Like, it has 4,000 attack, so it has a lot of attack. And yeah, and I talked a little bit about Lightning Chidori and all that. Lightning Chidori was the original Castell and 101. It locked you. It had to be wind monster specifically, but when it was XD summon, you would return like their battle trap, like maybe their mirror force or their dimensional prison, to the bottom of their deck, and then you would target their XDs to make it lose all its material and get rid of it. That was kind of the idea. It was a good 2-for-1, which was a good swing back in the day, because XDs were neg 1s and negging in card economy and going up in 1 in card economy. It's still good nowadays, but it was even bigger back then because you had to manage your resources a lot better. But anyway, overall, Heraldic Beasts. This deck is one of those decks that, like, they need, if they were to give them more support, the support that they would need are a few better main deck monsters and a few really good XEs. Because, and then some type, if they're going to give them another spell, some type of draw spell. Like, you could play the generic ones if you want. Pot of Desires doesn't really hurt this deck since almost everything is a 3 of anyway. But, like, having a good draw spell probably couldn't hurt. On top of, like, that. So, yeah, what I think this deck needs, though, is if they want you to restrict you more to psychics and machines, then they really need to, like, give them maybe specific XEs for that. And since the deck is mainly centered around XE summoning, make it be like, give us, if they were to make a structure deck, the cards that they should give us would be like 2 or 3 main deck monsters that, like, summon from hand, maybe discard, maybe send from deck, and stuff like that. Ways to fuel your graveyard even more than what we have for the deck if they were going to try to make it meta relevant. And then you would also give us XEs and that specifically call for Heraldic Beasts. And why do I say specifically calling for Heraldic Beasts is because if you restrict it to a certain archetype, you're allowing the deck to you're allowing a monster to have more potential on how strong it can be. So if you have, like, one that's like 2 Heraldic Beast monsters and all that, you potentially could have something, a walking negate, right? Like, Giant Hand, for example, was played in the deck too, because Giant Hand, you detach to negate an effect, and then you could reload it with the Eagle, right? Well, with this one, it would be something similar, right? If your opponent activates a card or effect, you could detach 2 materials from this card, negate the activation. Maybe you don't even have to have it, and if you do destroy it, that would be a really good card for Heraldic Beasts in particular, and they could get away with that if it was 2 level 4 Heraldic Beast monsters for it, so that you can make it like a psychic as well, or a machine, either or, to make use of make it a psychic specifically, actually. So you can make use of these 2 cards and kind of negate their downside and give you a reward for playing them. I know that card sounds really strong and all that, but Heraldic Beasts are pretty, like I said, they have a lot of, like, Skyward potential, but not, like, a lot of ways to do it. But all their potential comes from these 2 cards right here. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough about Heraldic Beasts. You can tell me what you think about them in the comment section below, and what you think the deck would need if the deck was to try to become meta, and the deck, and Konami, and all that, yeah. Anyway, if it's your birthday today, happy birthday. If you want to send me any cool deck profiles or replays, whether it be on the Heraldic Beast deck or not, email is in the description. Please let me know, but let me see what you guys have on all these, and maybe Heraldic Beast or not. If you have any suggestions for the Casual Duel series, go ahead and leave a comment on this video if you want to see me play some type of version of this deck, whether it be janky or not. And of course, and as always, have a wonderful day.